The sun was just beginning to rise over the alien world, casting a soft golden light across the peaceful village. The air was cool and fresh, with the smell of flowers and damp earth filling the atmosphere. The alien children played near the edge of the village, their laughter echoing through the trees. The adults were going about their morning tasks, unaware that their peaceful world was about to be shattered. In the distance, the sound of heavy footsteps could be heard. At first it was faint, almost like a growl. But within seconds, the noise grew louder, turning into a thunderous roar. Something was coming, something big. The sky darkened as enormous shadows blocked the sun, casting the village in a sudden, eerie twilight. The villagers froze in terror as they looked up. A horde of monstrous creatures, with twisted limbs and glowing eyes, appeared on the horizon. They moved fast, their massive bodies crashing through the forest like a tidal wave. The ground trembled beneath their feet. And the villagers realized with horror that these monsters were not just a few strays, they were coming for them. Among the villagers stood a lone human, a soldier who had crash-landed on this alien world days before. He had been stranded when his ship broke apart in the sky, but now this strange planet had become his battleground. He was just one man, with no way to call for help. But in that moment, the human didn't feel fear. He felt determination. The monsters were closing in. The human soldier quickly scanned his surroundings. He was surrounded by the villagers, most of whom were too terrified to move. The alien children, unaware of the danger, were still playing near the trees. He knew that he had to act quickly, without a moment's hesitation. He ran toward the nearest group of monsters, gripping the weapon he had scavenged from the wreckage of his ship. It wasn't much a basic plasma rifle, damaged in the crash, but it was all he had. The monsters were enormous, easily twice the size of a human. Their jagged teeth bared as they charged toward the village. The human didn't wait for them to get any closer. He fired a shot, and the blast hit one of the creatures in the chest. It roared in pain and stumbled back, but it didn't stop. The other monsters grew more aggressive, moving faster toward the human. He could see the terror in the eyes of the villagers, their eyes wide as they watched the battle unfold. He fired. Again, taking down another monster, but there were too many. For every one he shot, two more seemed to appear from the forest. The human's heart raced, but his focus was sharp. He had been trained for moments like this. Survival was his instinct. He dodged as one of the monsters lunged at him, its claws slashing through the air just inches from his face. He rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's strike, and fired another shot. The blast hit the monster in the shoulder, but it only slowed the beast down for a moment. This wasn't working. The human needed a new plan. He glanced around, looking for any advantage. The alien children were still near the trees, unaware of the danger. He had to get them to safety first. He couldn't save the whole village on his own, but if he could get the children out, it would be a start. With a quick glance at the villagers, the human shouted, "Get the children! Move them to the caves, now!" A few of the braver villagers rushed forward, grabbing the children and leading them toward the hidden caves on the outskirts of the village. The human watched them for a moment, then turned back to face the advancing monsters. There was no time to waste. He sprinted toward the nearest creature, his rifle blazing. The monster swiped at him with its claws, but the human ducked under. The attack and fired, hitting the creature square in the chest. It fell to the ground with a deafening crash. The remaining monsters roared in fury, enraged by the loss of their comrade. The human knew he couldn't hold them off forever. There were too many, and his weapon was running out of power. A teen needed to think fast. He looked to the sky, hoping for a miracle, but there was nothing, just the dark. Heavy clouds and the distant sound of the monster horde closing in. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something. The alien mother, a tall figure with silver blue skin, stepped forward from the shadows. Her eyes were calm, almost cold, but there was an intensity in her gaze that the human couldn't ignore. She was watching him closely, as if assessing the situation. For a moment, the human thought she might offer help. But instead, she said nothing. She just stood there, her expression unreadable. The human was confused. Was she going to help, or was she waiting for him to fail? The monsters continued to charge, and the human knew that time was running out. He had no choice but to fight on, no matter how impossible it seemed. His heart pounded in his chest, his body aching from the battle. But he couldn't stop now, not when there were lives at stake. With one last roar, he charged forward, ready to face whatever came next. This battle was far from over, and he would not back down. The battle was over, or at least, it seemed like it was. The last of the monstrous creatures lay motionless on the ground, their twisted bodies silent in the stillness of the aftermath. The village, once filled with laughter and life, now echoed with a haunting quiet. Smoke rose from the wreckage of buildings that had been destroyed in the attack, and the air was thick with the scent of burning wood. The human soldier stood in the center of the village, his weapon hanging loosely in his hand. He was covered in dirt and blood, but his eyes never left the horizon. The monsters had been driven back for now, but he knew this was far from over. This was only the beginning. The alien mother, who had remained on the outskirts of the battle, stepped forward. Her silvery blue skin shimmered under the dim light, her eyes sharp and calculating. She looked at the human with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. The human could tell she wasn't afraid, no. There was something else in her gaze. Something unreadable. Her children had been saved, but at what cost? Is it over? The human asked, his voice hoarse from the dust and adrenaline. She didn't answer him directly. Instead, she nodded toward the destroyed village, then back toward the dense forest on the edge of the land. They are coming back. And next time, there will be more. The human's heart sank. He had hoped that the creatures would retreat, that this was a single random attack, but now he understood. This was no accident. The monsters were hunting them, and they would not stop until they had finished what they started. The alien mother glanced over at the children, who were huddled together near the caves. Her expression softened for a moment, but only for a brief second. She wasn't one to show weakness. "We need to leave," she said. Her voice calm, but there was an edge to it. Stronger, faster. We cannot stay here. The human nodded grimly. He knew she was right. But where would they go? The nearest safe zone was days away, and the monsters had already proven they could track them with terrifying precision. The human glanced back at the children, their innocent faces now shadowed with fear. The mother's gaze followed his, and something shifted in her expressions, something like understanding. "Come," she said, motioning for him to follow her as she turned away. "There is a place deeper in the forest, a hidden refuge. But it's not without its dangers. We must hurry." Without waiting for a response, she began walking briskly toward the trees. The human hesitated for a moment, his mind racing, but he quickly followed. He had no other choice. This was the only lead they had, and he wasn't about to let these innocent beings fall into the hands of those monsters, as they moved through the dense forest. The trees seemed to close in around them. The leaves whispered in the wind, and the air was thick with tension. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made the human's heart race. The monsters were still out there, and they wouldn't give up easily. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The alien mother led them deeper into the woods, her pace unhurried, as though she knew these lands like the back of her hand. The human struggled to keep up, his legs heavy from the battle and the exhaustion creeping into his bones. But he couldn't let the fear show. Not now. "How do you know they'll come for us again?" the human asked, breaking the silence. The alien Mother didn't turn to look at him, but her voice carried through the stillness. They don't leave their prey, not until they have it. It's been hunting us for a long time. They know where we hide. We cannot outrun them forever. The words sent a chill down the human spine. The idea that the monsters were hunting them with such purpose made the fight seem even more hopeless. How could they win against such an enemy? How could they survive against creatures that never gave up? "What do you want from me?" the human asked, his frustration boiling over. He was tired, afraid, and still carrying the weight of the battle they had just fought. "You didn't even help during the fight. Why are you leading us now?" The alien mother stopped and turned to face him. Her piercing eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, the human saw something beyond the cold, calculating exterior. There was a depth to her gaze, a history of pain that she carried with her. "I don't need your help," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "But you are stronger than you realize. You have something that the monsters do not, your will to fight. That is why I need you." The human looked at her, confused. He wasn't sure what she meant, but he couldn't dwell on it. Time was running out, and the monsters would be on their trail soon enough. Where exactly? "Are we going?" he asked, eager to change the subject and keep moving. "A place where they cannot follow." "But it's not without danger," she repeated, her expression unreadable. They continued through the forest, their footsteps silent on the thick, moss-covered ground. The further they went, the darker it became as the trees grew taller and the canopy thickened, blocking out much of the light. The silence of the forest was oppressive, broken only by the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. The humans' mind raced as he thought about their next move. Where could they hide? And how long could they stay hidden before the monsters found them again? The deeper they traveled, the more the human felt the weight of the situation. They were being hunted, and there was nowhere left to run. They had no choice but to face what was coming. The forest grew even darker as they pushed forward, the dense trees blocking out most of the light. The human could feel the oppressive silence settling in around them. The air was thick, like something was waiting, something unseen, something dangerous. The alien mother walked ahead with purpose, her movements swift and silent. The children clung to her, their faces pale with fear. The human could barely keep up. His legs were still sore from the earlier battle, and the weight of his thoughts seemed to slow him down even more. Who were these monsters? Why were they attacking? And why had the alien mother stayed hidden during the fight? The questions gnawed at him, but he knew better than to ask her again. She hadn't answered his last question, and he wasn't sure if she would ever give him the truth. But there was something else, something more urgent. He could still feel the ground shaking, even hours after the battle. The monsters hadn't just been a random attack. They were hunting them, and they wouldn't stop. It wasn't just about survival, it was something far more personal, far more calculated. He had the strange feeling that the monsters had a reason, a goal as they moved deeper into the forest. The human finally spoke up, his voice hoarse but steady. "Where are we going? You said we would be safe." The alien mother turned slightly, her glowing eyes reflecting a hint of irritation. She paused, taking a breath before answering. "Safety is relative. We are going to the Heartwood. It is the last sanctuary we have left. But it will not be enough for long." The Heartwood, he had heard of it, but he didn't know much. It was a place of legend, rumored to be a vast ancient tree deep within the forest that could hide them from even the most dangerous creatures. But the human had a feeling that it wasn't just a refuge. It was a last-ditch effort. They had no other option. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that they weren't just running. They were being led, and not just by the alien mother. There was something more at play here. Hours passed as they traveled through the dense woods. The trees grew taller and thicker, their branches twisting into strange shapes as if trying to reach out and grab them. The human couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, tracking them from the shadows. But every time he looked over his shoulder, there was nothing, only the quiet rustling of leaves. Suddenly, the alien mother stopped. She raised a hand, signaling for the others to be silent. The human froze, his senses on high alert. He had heard something, a faint rustling, a low growl. It was coming from the shadows, deeper in the forest. The alien mother's eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. "They are close," she said, her voice low. "We cannot hide from them much longer. It is time to face the truth." The human's heart raced as he looked around. He couldn't see anything, just trees and shadows. But he could feel it now. The weight of something large, something powerful, moving through the forest. "Who are they?" the human asked, his voice barely a whisper. The alien mother didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned to face him fully, her expression dark and serious. "The creatures you fought are not just mindless beasts. They are part of a larger force. A force led by someone who has been hunting us for years. Someone who knows how to track us." The human's breath caught in his throat. "A leader?" he asked, his mind spinning. "Yes," the alien mother said. "The leader is not like the others. It is not just a monster. It is something ... else." Before the human could ask anything more, a piercing roar shattered the silence. The sound was deafening, reverberating through the trees. The ground shook beneath their feet as the roar echoed again, closer this time. The alien mother's face hardened. "We have to move. Now." Without warning, she turned and sprinted toward the deeper forest. The human had no choice but to follow. The alien children were close behind her, their small feet light on the forest floor. The human's legs screamed with exhaustion, but he pushed forward, focusing on the sound of the alien mother's footsteps and the urgency in her movements. They ran for what seemed like hours, the monstrous roar still ringing in their ears. Every now and then, the human thought he could see something moving in the shadows, large shapes, flickering at the edges of his vision. But every time he turned, they were gone. Finally, they arrived at a clearing. In the center, a massive tree rose, its roots twisting into the earth like a living thing. It was unlike anything the human had ever seen. Bark was dark and smooth, almost metallic, and its branches stretched far above, disappearing into the thick canopy. The heartwood. This was it. But just as they approached the tree, a terrifying sight appeared before them. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a towering, hulking creature. But unlike any monster the human had seen before, this was no simple beast. It was intelligent, its eyes glowing with a menacing red light. It was dressed in armor made of strange, dark metal, its movements calculated and precise. The human's heart sank as he realized what he was seeing. The monster leader was here. The alien mother stepped forward, her body tense, her eyes locked on the approaching figure. "He has found us," she said softly, but with a hint of fear. In her voice, the human took a deep breath, his mind racing. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. The moment when everything would change. The leader stopped a few feet away, its glowing eyes fixed on the human. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, with a voice that sent a chill down the human's spine, the monster leader spoke. "You are not what I expected," it said, its voice low and guttural. "But you will still serve my purpose." The human's grip tightened around his weapon. This was no longer just a battle for survival. This was something much deeper, something personal. He had no idea what the monster leader wanted, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going down without a fight. Asterisk, the moonlight barely pierced the thick canopy above, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The heartwood stood tall, its roots sprawling in every direction, as though it were a living organism pushing back against the dark. The air was damp and heavy with the scent of earth, but beneath that, there was something else, something that made the human skin crawl. It was the faint, unmistakable presence of the enemy. Lurking just beyond the reach of his vision, the alien mother stood before the tree. Her back straight, her expression a mask of cold calculation. She had been silent ever since the monster leader appeared, her mind clearly racing with thoughts the human couldn't read. But there was something in her eyes, something flickering behind the controlled exterior. Fear. Fear of what the leader might do next. The human's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had come this far, but it wasn't over yet. The leader was still out there, and the human knew that he had to prepare for the worst. But as he glanced around, a chill washed over him. Something didn't feel right. The atmosphere had changed. The sound of rustling leaves broke the silence. The human senses snapped into focus. He wasn't alone. Something or someone was moving in the shadows. His grip on his weapon tightened, but before he could react, a voice called out from the darkness. "Do not be alarmed," the voice said, a low, soothing tone. "We are not your enemies." The human's eyes darted toward the sound. From the shadows, a figure stepped into the faint moonlight. It was another alien, a male this time, with smooth violet skin and a cloak made of fine, shimmering threads. His eyes were calm but calculating, and there was something unnervingly familiar about him. The alien mother's expression hardened the moment she saw him. "You," the male alien's lips curled into a slight smile. "It's been a long time, hasn't it, Ryla?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Ryla, the alien mother's name. It wasn't what the human had expected. He had no time to process the revelation, though, as the situation quickly turned darker. Ryla's eyes narrowed, her body tense. The human could sense the tension between them, but he didn't understand why. "Why are you here, Varn?" she demanded, her voice colder than he had ever heard it. Varn, so this was the one she had been hiding from. The one she feared. "I've come for what's mine," Varn replied smoothly, his eyes shifting to the human. "And it seems I found something even better than what I was looking for." The human's stomach dropped. He didn't like the way Varn was looking at him. There was an air of familiarity between them, a connection that didn't sit well. "What do you want with me?" the human demanded, his voice edged with suspicion. Varn's smile widened. "Not with you, human. With her," he said, gesturing toward Ryla. "The heartwood is mine by right, but she has taken something that belongs to me. She doesn't belong here. She never did." The human's mind raced as he pieced together the implications of Varn's words. Ryla had been hiding something from him, from everyone. The heartwood, the refuge they had sought. Was it truly a sanctuary, or had it been a trap all along? Ryla, the human, said softly, his eyes locked on the alien mother. "Is this true? What is he talking about?" Ryla didn't answer immediately. Her gaze flickered between the human and Varn, her expression unreadable. For the first time, the human saw a crack in her stoic demeanor, a flicker of uncertainty. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, until she finally spoke. "You don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The heartwood is not just a place of refuge. 'Tis a place of power, a place that controls the fate of our people. And Varn, Varn betrayed us all." The weight of her words hit the human like a slap. Betrayal, the very thing he had feared most. Varn's eyes glinted with cold amusement. Betrayal? No, I simply know what must be done to save our people. Ryla is too weak, too afraid to do what is necessary. But I understand the true nature of power, and that is why I will take the heartwood." The human's mind raced. He had trusted Ryla. He had believed that they were working together toward a common goal. But now it seemed that nothing was as it appeared. Ryla had hidden the truth from him, and now the very person who had led them here was revealed to be part of the problem. "Why didn't you tell me?" the human asked, his voice filled with frustration. "Why didn't you warn me?" Ryla's gaze softened for a moment, a flicker of regret crossing her face. "I wanted to protect you," she said quietly. "But I see now that I have failed you. You are not just a soldier. You are part of this. The heartwood. The power it holds, it needs a protector. I thought I could control it, but I was wrong. Varn is right. The heartwood is a force that can change everything, and it must not fall into the wrong hands." Varn stepped closer, his movements smooth and deliberate. "You were always weak, Ryla. That's why you fled. But I will restore what was lost. I will control the heartwood, and with it, I will have the power to reshape this world." Ryla's eyes hardened. "Over my dead body." The human tensed, realizing that things had escalated far beyond what he had expected. The truth had come crashing down on him, and now there was no going back. Betrayal had seeped into the heart of their mission, and the enemy was closer than ever before. Varn was not just a monster. He was something worrisome with a goal, a vision, and a thirst for power. The human was torn. He had trusted Ryla, but now he saw her in a different light. Was she the hero she had seemed to be? Or was she just another player in a much larger game? The night was thick with tension, and the battle for the heartwood had only just begun. The tension in the air was palpable. The forest had fallen silent, as if even nature itself knew that something had shifted. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the clearing where the human, Ryla, and Varn stood locked in a tense standoff. The human's grip on his weapon tightened, his mind racing with the whirlwind of emotions that had just been unleashed. Betrayal, lies, power struggles. But there was no time to dwell on any of it. The real danger was closing in, and they had no choice but to fight. Varn's cold eyes never left Ryla. "You failed," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can protect the heartwood, but it's beyond you. You're too weak." Ryla's expression darkened. "And you think you're the answer," she retorted, her voice steady but filled with a venomous bite. "You will destroy everything, Varn. You always have." The human felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Varn wasn't just an enemy. He wasn't just another monster they could fight off. He was a force, a manipulator of power, someone who could destroy everything Ryla had fought to protect. And the worst part? He wasn't alone. Behind him, moving like shadows in the dark, the horde of monsters, those same terrifying creatures, slowly crept forward, drawn by the scent of blood and battle. They were the weapon Varn controlled, his loyal army, ready to tear everything apart. The human stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no longer any question about what had to be done. They had to survive. They had to stop Varn. "We don't have time for this," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "We need to move now." Ryla's eyes flickered toward the human, her expression torn. She knew what needed to be done, but her mind was still locked in the past, caught between the guilt of her choices and the looming threat of what Varn might do. "We can't just run," she whispered. "We have to stop him here. This is our last chance." Varn's laugh was dark and mocking. "Your last chance." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You're a fool, Ryla. You and your Little human pet are nothing compared to me. The monsters behind him growled, their glowing eyes fixed on the human and Ryla. They were no longer just mindless creatures. They were part of Varn's army, his instruments of destruction. And he would use them to crush anything that stood in his way. The human raised his weapon, his mind made up. There was no turning back now. "I don't care about your plan, Varn," he said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "If it's a fight you want, then it's a fight you'll get." Before Varn could respond, the human fired. The blast hit one of the monsters at the edge of the clearing, sending it crashing to the ground with a deafening roar. The others lunged forward, their claws slashing through the air. The human fired again, but there were too many. They were everywhere, swarming like a tide of death. Varn stepped back, watching the chaos unfold with cold amusement. "This is how it ends, Ryla," he said, his voice almost regretful.
"I warned you."
Ryla, her expression hardening, sprang into action. She wasn't just going to stand by and watch as everything fell apart. She moved with a fluid grace, her body like a weapon in its own right. Her eyes burned with an intensity the human hadn't seen before. She wasn't afraid anymore, she was angry. Ryla unleashed a surge of power from within, her hands glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The monsters hesitated for a moment, sensing the power radiating from her. But Varn wasn't done. He reached out, his hand glowing with dark energy. And a powerful blast shot toward Ryla. She blocked it with a shield of light, the impact sending a shockwave through the clearing. The human didn't hesitate. He knew this was their moment. While Varn and Ryla were locked in their deadly battle, the human fought back against the monsters. He ducked and rolled, firing his weapon at any creature that came too close. His movements were instinctual now, his survival instincts honed through every moment of this nightmare. But the monsters were relentless. They came at him from every angle, their teeth snapping, claws slashing. One creature lunged at him, its jaws wide, but the human managed to sidestep just in time. He fired, hitting the beast in the chest, but it didn't fall. It kept coming, its eyes wild with hunger. The human's breath quickened as he tried to reload his weapon, but he couldn't. There were too many. He was being overwhelmed. His heart pounded in his ears as he realized the terrifying truth. They were losing. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, blinding and intense. Ryla's power exploded outward, sending the monsters flying. The human stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the dazzling brightness. When the light faded, the monsters were gone, dispersed, thrown back into the forest by the sheer force of Ryla's will. Ryla stood at the center of the clearing, breathing heavily, her body glowing faintly from the exertion. The human could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the toll it had taken on her. She had done it. For now, at least. Varn was on his knees, his hands clenched into fists, his face twisted in rage. "You think you've won," he snarled. "This is only the beginning. You can't stop me. You never could." Ryla took a step forward, her eyes cold and unwavering. "I don't need to stop you. I only need to make sure you don't destroy everything." The human could feel the weight of the moment. Varn was still dangerous, still plotting, but for now, they had a victory. It wasn't over yet, but it was enough to give them a fighting chance. As Varn slowly rose, his face a mask of fury, the human knew that this was far from the end. It had only just begun. They would fight again, and this time they would not back down. The quiet after the battle was almost worse than the chaos itself. The forest was eerily still, the air thick with smoke and the scent of the earth that had been disturbed by the violence. The human stood in the center of the clearing, his weapon hanging loosely by his side. His chest heaved with exhaustion, his body bruised and battered from the fight. His thoughts were muddled, clouded by the weight of the struggle that had just unfolded. They had won this battle, but he knew better than to think it was over. There was always more. Always something worse lurking in the shadows. Ryla stood a few feet away, her glowing hands still flickering with residual energy from the blast she had unleashed. Her face was weary, the intensity of the moment fading into something deeper. Quiet sorrow that the human could see even in the dim light. Her power had been incredible, but it had drained her. And the exhaustion was visible in the way she held herself. They had faced Varn and his monsters. And for a moment, it seemed as though they had lost. But Ryla had pushed forward, unleashing everything she had left to send the creatures scattering into the forest. The human didn't know what the next steps would be, but he knew that whatever came next would be a fight for their survival. Varn would not stay down for long. He was relentless, and his thirst for power was insatiable as the human approached Ryla. He could see the toll the battle had taken on her. Her body trembled slightly, and her glowing aura was flickering as if it was struggling to stay alive. She had been pushing herself to the limits, and now it seemed that the weight of everything was finally catching up to her. "You're not alone in this," the human said softly, his voice steady, though it carried the weight of all the emotions. He had been holding in. He reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "We're in this together." Ryla met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something more, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had formed through their struggle. Her lips parted as though she wanted to say something, but the words never came. Instead, she looked away, her gaze shifting back to the forest. The monsters would be regrouping, and she knew that there was little time left before they returned. Stronger and more determined than ever. "We can't stay here," she finally said, her voice quiet but firm. "Varn will return with a greater force. The Heartwood won't be enough to protect us forever." The human nodded. He knew she was right. They couldn't afford to wait around, hoping for a miracle. The only way forward was to keep moving, keep fighting. But where could they go? The monsters were everywhere, their reach endless. And the Heartwood, despite its power, wasn't an invincible shield. It had its limits. Ryla's voice broke through. His thoughts, her words, sharp with resolve. "I need to make sure the Heartwood is protected. I've failed before, and I won't let that happen again. The monsters won't stop coming, and if Varn gets his hands on it, everything we've fought for will be destroyed." The human's eyes narrowed as he processed her words. He knew the Heartwood was important to her, but he didn't fully understand why. She had hinted at its power, its significance, but she had always kept its true nature hidden from him. It seemed that whatever was inside that tree, whatever it represented, was the key to everything. The future of their people. Their survival, perhaps even the fate of the entire planet, depended on it. "I'll protect you," the human said, his voice unwavering. "Whatever it takes." Ryla looked at him, her expression softening for a moment. She seemed to weigh his words, the weight of their journey settling into her eyes. Then, just as quickly, her face hardened again. She wasn't ready to show weakness. Not yet. "I have to do this," she whispered, almost to herself. "I have to stop Varn. He's too dangerous." Before the human could respond, a low, distant rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. It wasn't a typical tremor. This was something far worse. The monsters were coming. The sound grew louder, closer. The human's breath hitched, and instinctively, he turned toward the forest. The ground trembled again, stronger this time, and then a shape emerged from the shadows. Not one of Varn's monsters. This was something else entirely. It was the leader, Varn himself, standing tall at the head of his monstrous army. His dark armor gleamed in the dim light, and his eyes burned with a cold, merciless fire. He had returned, and he wasn't alone. Behind him, the creatures shuffled forward, their hulking bodies creating an impenetrable wave of movement. They were many, far more than the human had seen before. The leader had brought reinforcements, and they were ready for war. Varn's voice rang out, carrying over the wind. "I told you, Rila, you can't win. You never could." The human's heart raced. They couldn't stand against an army like this, not alone. Not now. Rila stepped forward, her hands glowing brightly once more. Her power surged, but it was clear that it wasn't enough. She was spent. The light that had once blazed so brilliantly was now flickering, weak, struggling to stay alive. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of years of regret. "I never wanted you to be a part of this. I never wanted you to lose everything." The human stood motionless, unsure of what she meant. But as Varn's army advanced, he knew there was only one choice left. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly, stepping between Rila and the approaching threat. He raised his weapon, ready for the fight of his life. But deep down, he knew this wouldn't be like the last battle. They were outnumbered. The odds were impossible. And yet, he refused to back down. Not now. Ryla's eyes softened. "You can't." "You don't have to," but the human was already moving. He took one final look at her, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what needed to be done. If this was the end, then he would make it count. The army surged forward, and the human rushed into the fray, ready to fight for survival, his final stand. The battlefield was a storm of chaos. The human fought with every ounce of strength he had left, his weapon firing relentlessly into the advancing horde of monsters. The ground shook beneath his feet as the creatures charged, their snarls and roars echoing through the forest like a wave crashing upon the shore. Every movement felt like an eternity, each breath strained, as though time itself was slowing down in the face of inevitable defeat. Yet, the human didn't falter. His mind was sharp, his resolve unshaken. He moved with the instinct of a soldier, dodging, rolling, and firing, each shot landing true, taking down one monster after another. But the more he fought, the more he realized just how impossible this fight was. They were everywhere, too many, too strong. The odds were against them. Rila stood behind him, her power flickering weakly. She had given everything she had, but the energy that had once been a blinding force was now little more than a faint glow around her hands. She was drained, weakened by the battles they had already fought. She watched the human, her expression, a mix of admiration and sorrow. She knew what was happening. She knew that the human was sacrificing himself for them, sacrificing everything. To buy them time, the human didn't know how much longer he could keep going. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, and the weight of his weapon felt heavier with each passing second. He had no illusions left. He wasn't going to survive this fight, but he wasn't giving up either. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to let the monsters win. Not when there was still a chance to protect the people he had come to care for. Ryla's voice, faint but clear, reached him over the chaos. "You've done enough," she called, her words carrying across the clearing. "You can't do this alone. Let me help you." But the human's eyes never left the oncoming wave of creatures. His focus was locked on them, his body moving in instinct, a survival mechanism that pushed him forward even as his strength began to fade. "I'm not done yet," he said, gritting his teeth as he took down another monster, his breath ragged but determined. Ryla's heart clenched as she watched him, her resolve breaking. She had never wanted this, never wanted to see him sacrifice himself. He was a human, fragile compared to the beings of her world. Yet here he was standing tall, fighting against impossible odds for the survival of others. For her people, for her. The weight of his actions hit her all at once, and she knew there was no way she could let him fall alone. The creatures were closing in, their bloodthirsty eyes glowing in the dim light, their claws outstretched, ready to tear him apart. The human's weapon ran dry, his last shot ringing out uselessly into the night. Desperation flickered in his chest. But just as the monsters were upon him, the ground trembled once more, not from the creature's movements, but from something far more powerful, though the sound of cracking roots and splintering wood echoed through the forest. Ryla's eyes widened in realization. "It's time," she whispered. "The heartwood." The ancient tree that had stood at the center of the clearing began to pulse with a light that was brighter than anything the human had ever seen. The glow from the tree bathed the entire clearing in a soft, ethereal light, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out. Sweeping over the battlefield, the monsters stopped in their tracks, their glowing eyes flickering with uncertainty. Even Varn, standing at the edge of the clearing, appeared momentarily stunned, his dark form cast in the tree's light. The power emanating from the heartwood was unlike anything the human could comprehend. It wasn't just energy. It was a force of life itself, ancient and unstoppable. Ryla stepped forward, her eyes locked on the heartwood. She extended her hands, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her gaze unwavering. "I will protect this," she said, her voice filled with an emotion the human had never heard from her before. It wasn't just determination, it was a deep, raw vulnerability. "I've failed before. I won't fail again." The heartwood's light intensified, and the human felt an overwhelming wave of energy wash over him. It was as though the very air around them had changed, charged with an ancient power that surged into every fiber of his being. The pain in his body dulled, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The power was overwhelming, but it was also a gift. The heartwood was giving them a real chance to win. Ryla's hands glowed with this newfound power, and she turned to face the oncoming army. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She stepped into the light, her form radiating strength, and raised her arms toward the sky. "Begone," she said, her voice a command. The sky cracked open above them, lightning flashing as the heartwood's energy flooded the clearing. The monsters screamed as the power washed over them, the energy pulsing through their very beings, stripping them of their strength. The dark magic that had controlled them shattered, and one by one the creatures fell, collapsing into dust. But the battle wasn't over. Varn, seeing his army crumbling, stepped forward, his eyes burning with fury. "You think you've won," he snarled. "This isn't over." Ryla turned to face him, her power now a blinding beacon of light. She raised a hand, and the very ground beneath them trembled in response. The heartwood's energy surged toward her, wrapping around her in a cocoon of light. She spoke softly, her voice filled with a quiet finality. "This ends now." With a final surge of power, the heartwood's energy collided with Varn, enveloping him in a burst of light. The dark magic that had once made him invincible shattered, and Varn was consumed by the power, his form disintegrating into nothingness. The forest fell silent once more. The battle was over. The human collapsed to his knees, the weight of everything finally crashing down on him. He was alive barely, but he was alive. And the monsters, the army, Varn, they were gone. The forest was at peace, and Ryla stood before him, her hands still glowing, her energy spent. "You did it," the human said, his voice weak but filled with awe. Ryla looked down at him, her expression softening. "We did it," she corrected, her voice barely above a whisper. The heartwood's light began to fade, the energy that had once been overwhelming now settling into a peaceful glow. Ryla knelt beside the human, her hands gently touching his shoulder. "You've saved us all," she said quietly, and as the moon rose high in the sky, casting its silver light over the clearing. The human realized that this was his reward, this moment of peace, of knowing he had done everything in his power to protect them. He had fought, he had sacrificed, and in the end, he had become more than just a soldier. He had become a hero.